Hello and welcome back to the Genesis Designs and Modelcraft workbench, and today I'm going to try and do a quick snip review on this ICM de Havilland H2A Tiger Moth. So this is the relatively recent 132 release. It's obviously an all new kit, bears no resemblance to the old Matchbox one. And I picked this up recently. Regular viewers to the channel will not need to ask why. Obviously went flying in one back in September. So I got this one from Models for Sale kit, £32. So £32 for a 1/32 kit. As you can see, it's a reasonably large box, although it's quite skinny. So without further ado, let's have a look inside. So in common with ICM kits as general, you take the lid off only to be presented with a box. I don't know why they do this, it cracks me up a bit to be honest, but you've got a top opening, very nice cardboard box inside the box art box if you like, and here's what you're presented with. Fairly modest amount of sprues, some instructions, and obviously some decals. So let's have a look at these. It's the resealable sort of envelope style bag. Quite like these because it means I can have a little look at things and put it all back together and claim it's new. It's a very noisy bag, I apologise. So here we go, what we got here, 1, 2, 3 sprues. So we'll start with the biggest one. Clearly fuselage, wings and flying controls. So I've built a couple of these now, these 1/32 ICM kits, and I'm a big fan. ICM kits have come a long way. I've mentioned in other views about the old Spitfire and Mustang kits, which were essentially, to be honest, copies of more mainstream kits but just done less well. Quality control was a huge issue and some of the mouldings were super shady. But the kits themselves, in all honesty, were pretty sound if you could batter your way through the build. And incredible value for money actually. And still are to a degree. These modern kits couldn't be more different. These are properly designed, properly engineered, in my experience fit together fabulously well. I've now built, well I've only built 2, it's not like I'm a paragon of ICM kits or anything, but I've built the Polycarpov I-16 monoplane, and around about this time last year, holiday build wasn't it, the Fiat CR42 Luftwaffe edition. What I tend to find with them is the detail, it's kind of chunky but really crisp, so it sort of works because it's a relatively large scale. It kind of works anyway. Anyway, I digress. Let's have a look at these parts. So fuselage halves, as you can see, I can see a little bit of flash straight away. There's a little bit on the bottom part of that engine front, but not enough to be in any way a concern, honestly. The fabric representation is lovely. I'll just get the light on that so you can see. It's there, but there's no stupid massive rib tapes with stupid massive staple detail or anything like that. It's much more appropriate, to be honest. And actually, in 32nd scale, if you were so inclined, you could probably get away with a little bit more detail than this. But as I say, I'm not a big fan of all that. It's far easier for me to add some very thin rib tape detail to this than it is to take away the big overstated nonsense from another kit. So I'm looking at you, Eduard. Turning it over inside, you've got some sort of framework detail in there. There are a few ejector pin circles that would be visible potentially in there, but they're very small, so probably allowable. A seat there, we've got an engine. It's all pretty obvious stuff, but very nicely done. Yeah, okay. Next one. This is just the lower, it's the bottom of the top wing and the top of the bottom wing. So the lower wing includes a section of the fuselage, the cockpit floor area. It's got the tread plate detail moulded into there, and then the bottom of the upper wing has the bottom of the fuel tank moulded in. and this is a contentious thing with Tiger Moths. So back in the day, years ago, when I was a lass, I built a 1/5 scale flying Tiger Moth. It never flew, but I did build it. So it was like a 70 odd inch wingspan balsa wood Tiger Moth, which was built from a plan, completely from scratch, but using a plan obviously. And ridiculously enough, what stopped that model from actually getting finished to the point of being put together to fly was my complete inability to replicate this corrugated finish to my satisfaction on that wing fuel tank. And here it is in plastic, all nicely moulded in, good to go. So nothing dramatic there, all very nice and tidy. And the final sprue then is our, shall we say, detail parts. Now the Tiger Moth is not a complex aeroplane, so there aren't that many detail parts, but again, as I've just said, what there is very competently done. So if I put, this is the right word, so we've got wheels here in 2 halves, no tread detail, and these are the hubcaps with the DH logo embossed on them. You've got various sort of internal cockpit parts. There's the slats for your upper wings there. There's the anti-spin strakes for the top of the rear fuselage if you're going to fit them. The undercarriage parts, a propeller, which is okay. Main interplane struts, cabane struts, it's all there. Instrument panels, and here is a great example of what I'm on about, of how the detail on these parts is, it's really chunky, and you could say overscale, but it's so crisply done that it kind of gets away with it. There's an exhaust pipe there, and some sort of smaller details for inside the cockpits, and control horns, very nicely done. So as you can see, it's quite a simple kit. Despite the scale, it's pretty simple. What I should have done, I suppose, was get an Airfix 1/48 one to compare it. I think the Airfix one's probably more complicated. So here we have the instruction booklet, A4 in full colour, nice smooth paper. There's a little bit of history. We've got both Russian and English. The paint colour call-outs are in Revell or Tamiya, so they're easy to cross-reference if you don't use either of those things. And the first couple of pages, as usual, are taken up with sprue layout diagrams complete with numbering, so nice and easy to follow. Starting with construction then, the first thing you come across, get in frame, is some drilling. Doesn't tell you what sort, oh it does, yeah, 0.3mm. The instructions are asking you to drill 0.3mm holes in these places, and this is for rigging. I'll just whip through, I won't labour over this because it is very simple. But it's a really nice touch here, and to be honest, experienced modelers will probably poo-poo it, and I probably won't do it, but I mentioned the hole drilling. I'll bring this in a bit tighter so it's easy to see without holding up. So you've already drilled these 4 holes, and here it's telling you to put a piece of something. It doesn't actually specify what particularly, but a piece of rigging thread or whatever you're going to use of 0.1mm in diameter, 40 centimeters long. Thread it through these 2 holes, and the same out here. This is an interesting concept, and this is something that biplane modelers I've known in the past tend to do, or some of them will do, is to pre-drill and pre-fit rigging wires as they're going through construction, and it's a perfectly valid concept actually. And this continues throughout the build, and here's all your fuselage going together. As I say, the cockpits are quite rudimentary on the real thing, there's not much going on, so that's all very easy, and you very quickly end up with an essentially finished rear fuselage. And here you've got the choice of anti-spin strakes or not, depending what type of variant you're going for. You can build your engine there. It again is not, I think, really designed to be showed off with open cowls, but it's enough there so that when you look through the big gaps in the front, there's something to look at. Continuing with fitting cowls and cockpit doors. Crash pads on the cockpits and your windscreens, which are here. I haven't taken them out of the pack, but There they are. And then when you get onto the wings, it's asking you to do the same thing again, and this is where it's going to sort of diverge away from what you might be used to. So it's saying again, drill 0.3mm holes in all these places. And when you look at the parts, the beginnings of these holes are present but flashed over. Do you see here? They're actually flashed over, but they're there quite clearly marked, so it's easy to know actually where they want you to drill it. You don't have to just rely on this. So you're building up the cockpit floor structure on this upper part of the lower wing, complete with seats, and then introducing that to the fuselage. But at this point you still haven't fitted the underside of the lower wings, and then it goes on to do the same with the top wing. Drill it out, fit it to the model, but you haven't actually fitted the top of the wings yet, and this allows you, using their method as shown here, to thread all your rigging wires through, and you can do it in such a way almost that you're just using one piece of thread or whatever. Thread it through all these holes to complete the rigging, and then fit the top of the wing and indeed the bottom, which is great. Makes the rigging a lot easier, especially if you're happy to just have some normal thread in there instead of what it should be, but more of that later. But I personally would be really concerned about how I'm going to deal with the seams on these parts, bearing in mind that this is now a fully built biplane. And those of you that are familiar with biplane construction will probably be already saying, well yes, but you need to paint it before you put the top wing on, because how am I going to paint the bottom of the top wing nicely if it's all fitted? It's a great idea, but in practice it's probably not all that practical, particularly in a large scale like this, this type of model where you're likely to be wanting to go for a decent finish and a decent build. It's not a little 1/72 brush painted job, but it's there, the option's there, it clearly shows you how to do it, and also this diagram is more than adequate to show you where the rigging needs to be should you not choose to do it this way. Anyhow, continuing from there, then finishing off construction, fit the slats, fit the ailerons, only has ailerons on the lower wings, and then fit the undercarriage, which just like the rest of it is entirely uncomplicated. Struts fore and aft, and then the main assembly in the middle. Finally, some control horns, bell cranks and whatnot, tailplane struts, little pieces, lots of diagrams for not very many pieces, and then control surface rigging at the end, which is what you put into the fuselage right at the beginning. That 40cm long string was actually the rudder cabling. And there she is done. You've got some mast templates here. If you choose to, you can maybe put some sellotape over this, then put your masking tape on and cut according to the diagrams. But being such simple windscreens, I'd argue that it's probably easier just to mask it up in situ the way you normally would. And then the colour options that you get presented within the kit: number 3 training flight squadron, number 3 flight training squadron, that doesn't make sense. RAF Grantham 1938, it's just silver overall with a tricolour rudder. And number 25 Polish Elementary Flying Training School, summer 1944. So two very generic schemes. I don't need to tell you that there's a world of paint schemes out there for Tiger Moths, so you really don't need to feel constrained to what the kit supplies, and I'm quite sure many aftermarket decals will be appearing in due course. Speaking of decals, here is the sheet, and ICM decals are great, they're right up there. I don't know who prints them, probably in-house, but they're very thin, glossy, beautiful decals, really easy to use. I'm not very excited about the colours here. I think that the red is a bit bright on the dull red. But yeah, there they are. They're in register. These serials have a white outline, it's all in register, and you get...
Okay, I found this on the web for what's have a white outline alt and register. Check it out.
Well, thanks Siri, but I don't remember asking you about that. Apologies. And you get instrument dials too, which is a nice touch. So just to make my life complicated, and because I'm a sucker, and because I flew a Tiger Moth and I want to make a model of it, I bought myself a little bit of accessories to go with this. Yeah, so I'll go through them one by one. This represents, honestly, virtually a full suite of extras for this if you look at Hannon's. First thing is that fuel tank. So on the kit, the upper part of the fuel tank joins, and you're going to end up with a joint along that front edge that's going to be awkward to fix. This resin part removes the need for that to be done, and it does come with some of the scoops and bends and things separately too. Just cut a little bit away. Don't need to turn it that way up, do I? Cut a little bit away to allow it to fit, and it just plops straight on. It also has the side corrugation quite nicely done. It's nicely done. It's beautifully moulded, and it will save a lot of time and effort on that fuel tank. These are CMK resin parts. This fuel tank from Hannon's costs £6.99. Next up, wheels. Now the only reason I got a wheel set, because the wheels in the kit are perfectly adequate and there's no tread to worry about, is because the aircraft I want to model does not have the DH wheel covers. It has naked wheels as shown in the centre of these 5. So I need that. But this does come with plain wheel caps and the DH logos again, plus you've got covered or uncovered inners. So that's nice. The tyres themselves have got words on them. This, if I'm honest, is another thing I'm not a big fan of. Yes, tyres have got writing on them, just the same as car tyres, but you could trip over these words if you walk past this plane. They're really nowhere near as pronounced as the aftermarket would have you believe, so they will have to be knocked back a little bit. And as an extra little bonus, this set comes with a resin moulded, don't know if the light's very good for that to be obvious and visible, there you go, a resin moulded tail skid assembly, which if you want to be picky, you're going to have to clear out the resin webs from the middle of that a little bit. But it's a nice little set. It covers all the options that you're going to run into for these, and these wheels cost £7.80. And the final CMK part is the propeller. Now again, I didn't initially order this because I thought, well, kit propeller can't be that bad, and it isn't, but the resin one is a lot better. It's a lot finer, and there's no seam line to remove, plus you get a bit of back plate detail and a much nicer sort of spinner cone. So it's not entirely necessary, but since I was ordering the stuff I thought, well, I'll get that as well. Propeller's £3.40, so it's not an expensive upgrade, but you know, you could just thin the plastic part and add a bit of detail yourself, so it's not really necessary. And then we get on to the expensive stuff. Now initially I bought the Eduard photo etch. This is the more expensive of the two options. There are 2 sets listed on Hannon's. There's effectively the zoom set, which is basically this, and then there's this set which also includes sort of airframe details and what have you. Now this set costs £24.80. Eduard sets are not inexpensive anymore. So you get coloured instrument panels with the dials, and they've got the sort of the pre-glossed dials, which is, I think, a really nice touch, and compass faces and what have you. And then you've got throttle handle, trim quadrant details, and this is a piece that just fits across the bulkhead. And then the brass side of things, or the non-pre-coloured, you've got some boxes and bits and pieces. Notice sides for the fuel tank, which are embossed but clearly not actually corrugated as such. These large pieces are engine cowl side panels, cockpit doors, and a load of circles. Some of these aircraft, when you look at them, you can see sort of doped on circular patches, which are some form of inspection area, I think. but I think these would be, even in 32nd scale, these are going to be a bit overscale, to be honest, and it's not something that I'm really keen on. Just a quick flip through the instructions just so you can see how that all goes. The quadrants that I spoke of, this is where the sort of kind of built-in seat and kind of bulkhead arrangement thing. That just fits on there as a faceplate. Instrument panels are pretty self-explanatory. Engine cowl side panels, it says use plastic part D24 to shape PE part, which is fine, but you have to bend metal further than you want it to be bent to get it to stay where you want it, so that's only part of the solution really. Some little bits of floor plates, a new brass engine cooling vent thing, and then you've got a load of control surface, the horns, bits and pieces, some detail for the belly. It's all very nice, and this is what I'm on about with the circles, the inspection covers. There's lots of them. I actually think if you fitted all these, you'd make your Tiger Moth look like it had measles. I don't think it would be very attractive personally, but it's all about choices, this hobby. So that's £24.80 worth. And then I was back on Hannon's the other day. I saw this set. I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a look. This is some photo etched rigging. I said I'd come back to rigging, didn't I? So this is Ames photo etch. I believe it's stainless steel. It's quite noisy. Photo etch rigging, that's obviously this section here. Now the thing with the Tiger, and honestly most aircraft that feature rigging, the rigging, it isn't just cables. It's streamlined sort of solid wires. They have an aerofoil shape to them. I think they were originally invented, they used to be called RAF wires, the Royal Aircraft Factory at Farnborough in sort of First World War era, and it's this streamlined aerodynamic solid rigging, which if you use lycra thread in 32nd scale, it doesn't look anything like that. This is flat photo etched, and it includes some sort of representation of fittings at the ends of it as well. Now clearly the issue with this is going to be fitting it. These have to be exactly the right length to work. If they're too long, you'll end up with a bow in things, and if they're too short, then they're too short. So that really relies on the accuracy of the build and the accuracy of how this has been mapped out for the kit. But we'll give it a try, we'll see how it comes out. And fortunately or unfortunately, this set also duplicates some of the stuff that's in the Eduard set. So the instrument panels and quadrants and things are all here too, and you've also got some Sutton style belts included on this one. The seat belts that were in the aircraft I flew were not Sutton style belts, and the Eduard set, for reasons best known to Eduard, doesn't actually include seat belts at all. So I will be scratch building. Oh sorry, it does, there they are. Very just lap straps only, basic ones, not Sutton. So I'll be scratch building those anyway. So yeah, this set does duplicate a fair bit of what's in the Eduard set. Some of it is better actually. And this set comes in at £18. So again, we'll see how it goes. The instructions you get with this one, it's just printed on a piece of paper. It's in colour. Bend, remove, scratch build, just showing you. So remove the detail on the instrument panel to fit the new ones. Scratch build a compass housing. It's just a piece of relevant sized rod. Shows you where to fit everything. It's no bother at all. And there's the rigging diagram. And here it says some restored Tiger Moths have circular plates all over the lower wing surfaces. Some seem to have none at all. Use your own judgment. Fair enough. Bracing wires, his diagram shows you exactly where all of the wires need to be. Carefully pre-drill holes to aid both location and adjustment. Pre-drill holes depending on thickness of photo etch part where indicated by black circles. Also, make sure to drill the holes for wires at the angle of travel so strong stainless material stays flat. Check as many photos as possible first, and it shows you via the letter codes which wires are meant to go where. So I'm hoping that the kit supplied attachment points will work with this, and obviously the idea of drilling at the angle of travel, because if you tried to bend the attachment point you're going to potentially put a bend into the wire that you won't be able to get rid of. Well, let's say we'll see how that pans out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to snipperoo. I'm going to get all the main parts off. Now this might not work very well, I apologise if not, because it's a biplane, but we'll see how far we get and show you just how nicely these kits go together actually. So I'll be right back. Alrighty then, do you join me sort of 20 odd minutes later, and I've snipped all the main parts off and cleaned them up sufficient that we can play test fitting. So obviously I'll start off with the fuselage. I've already, in fact no I won't, I've already tamiya taped the wings together. So they do fit very nicely to be honest, but there is a joint. It isn't one that's going to disappear with glue, and it is one that's going to need to be rectified. So look how floppy this is. Okay, likewise ICM plastic is quite soft. It's probably even softer than Airfix plastic, which is almost impossible to believe actually, but it even the actual main kind of wing, it's quite bendy. So imagine trying to sort these seams out, particularly on the upper wing, having rigged it in the way the instructions suggest and then having to deal with all the seams. I'm not a fan of that plan. I don't think it'll work. I think it will end up getting broken. On the trailing edge it's got a good deal of that thing going where the inner parts, I mean they're not in the way of it, but the way it joins together you're sort of left with a little gap regardless of what you do. So and it's also, to be honest, quite thick, so I would probably thin it out from the inside a little bit before joining it, and then use super glue along the back edge to fill it so that you can then sort of feather it out to a nice fine edge without any worries of it splitting. The ailerons fit into these lovely slots, a lovely slot in there when you put the two together, and an equally big tab, and when you put it in, pretty much will hold itself in under, you know, it's a very light friction fit, but there's enough movement in it without compromising that joint that you can have a little bit of deflection should you wish without any issues at all. And there's how it's going to look fitted, so it appears separate. Put those out of the way. So yeah, there's your wings. They fit together fine, no real issues. The sprue stubs are relatively large, and the forward face of both upper and lower parts is tapered back quite sharply, so they're quite awkward to trim. And obviously if you start going to town with sanding sticks to get rid of the sprue stubs, the sort of the riblet detail is going to get lost quite easily if you're not careful. So a bit of angled trimming with the nippers and some scalpel blade action to get rid of those. The flash issue, I did mention there was some flash on some of the parts. There are a couple of places where that's noticeable. The sort of the inner faces of the wings, and you can see how there's also a visible, if I put it in the camera you could see how there's also a visible seam here, which you're going to want to get rid of as well. So again, I don't think, personally, this is opinion and it's personal choice at the end of the day, but I don't think that the way the instructions recommend is really a route worth taking. And it's worth noting that as fragile as this seems, it's as a result of the fact that ICM have replicated the way these things go together in real life. They're attached in here, a couple of points on the spars, and all this does hang free, as it were. So there's very little plastic actually between the wings and the fuselage, and you know that is going to lead to some compromises for strength. And you can see it's a nice size. It's not It's not huge, but it also is big enough, but without being unwieldy, at least at this stage. Anywho, let's put the fuselage together. Now what I've done with these parts, I've cut them away from the sprues, obviously, and I've simply trimmed the sprue stubs to the point where they're not in the way. I haven't done any other preparation on these parts, so this is really is a no frills fit together. So without any further prep, this fuselage fits together all but perfectly. Note also that this is not a flat bottom, there's a slight peak to it, and the same is true on the top. The upper surface is virtually flawless, and I'm just going to tape that now. Didn't want to tape it previously because I just wanted to be able to see there's no trickery. There's a remarkable amount of cynicism around the modelling world about reviewers and what they will and won't say in reviews, so keeping it transparent, folks. So tape that together best I can. Obviously it's all open, so it's never going to be structurally amazing with just tape on it. Again, there's flash on at the seam here, but it's no biggie. That seam's going to be dealt with anyway, so don't worry about it. Right, so I'll put the front firewall in and try and tape it into position as best I can, just to hold the fuselage together a little bit better, or let it hold its shape a little bit better anyway. I'm getting in a muddle. A lot of the joints on this are sort of tapered, so it doesn't lock together really positively, but once it's glued it will stay together very nicely. So there we have the basic sort of main fuselage assembly, and yeah, no drums at all, absolutely beautiful. It has to be glued, the joint has to be sanded, but within that caveat this is about as good as it gets, to be honest, and that's with no further prep. So no issues there. No, so the first issue I did spot the anti-spin strake, or not, depending which one you want to do. There's a locating hole and a peg there, and it sure enough locates into position quite nicely, but there is a reasonable gap at the front and it seems to sit a bit high. Upon closer inspection there's a sort of a nub. You can't call it flash. I'll try and get the camera to show you this. Hopefully you can see there's almost like a sloped sort of web in the middle of one of the halves. You can just see it there. That shouldn't be there. It's a bit of a dirty sort of joint. It should be a crisp, nice 90-degree joint. So I'll just trim that out of the way. So you can see, because I'm doing this here, this isn't a big job to sort this out. But if you don't sort of take the time to test fit and assess what's going on, these are the things you miss, and you end up with a horrible fit and wonder why. Boom, look at the difference, just like that. So that's the spin strake, that sits in place there. Just put a little bit, it's going to look quite ugly because I'm going to have to use quite a lot of tape. Just pop a bit of tape on the front of that. And then the tail plane is a one piece. Elevators are integral, but it's a very, very simple job if one wishes to cut these free. But in fact, I think just carefully bending it would suffice, because just bend it and flex them down, or score along the top and just flex the whole thing down rather than cutting it free completely. So this has a slot in the lower surface to locate it. And look how nicely that butts up to that spin strake. And note also underneath there are no unsightly gaps. And again, with this type of aircraft, the fact that there is any gap could there often are on the real thing. There's often see-through bits and gaps on these type of aircraft. So, and then again you've got a one-piece fin and rudder and tail skid. So if wanted, that tail skid can be replaced with the one from the CMK set, the wheel set. Fish, 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 there it is. when comparing the two side by side, this one is considerably more detailed, to be fair. And it includes a piece of that fin post, so you could just chop the whole fin post off and replace the whole lot if wanted. I don't think I would. I think I'd attach it, but it does offer a bit more detail, definitely. It's quite nice. It's moulded in a different type of resin, which is hopefully less, it's slightly flexible, so hopefully less likely to break at the slightest provocation. So yeah, the fin simply plugs into the little slot on top of the tailplane, and it isn't going to stay there by itself because it's not much of a slot and there's no other location for it. There we have it. The delightful lines of the Tiger Moth start to appear. As I say, these parts just aren't going to stay. They need glue. I'll do my best. Okay, hold that on. Put that back in there. Yeah, but you can see my point. So there we go. Tails added. So from here to attach the lower wing, it's got that piece of fuselage floor moulded in, and again the tapered. Notice the tapered join areas. And the bottom of the fuselage is also tapered, so it's like a mitre joint essentially. And sure enough, the whole lot just pops into place like it was made for it. One would argue that it was. Get some tape on that as well. And with glue, with it being this type of joint, it will kind of almost melt together, and they pretty much won't be a joint that needs addressing, to be honest. Let's take that off because it's just going to flap about. If you use liquid cement rather than cyano super glue, I think that joint's going to all but disappear without any real effort at all. There we are. So there's that on. And even just the weight of the fuselage with no gubbins, the wings won't hold it. So again, this concept of pre-drilling and pre-rigging and then sorting out the seams on the wings is just not going to fly. Excuse the pun. So there we have with that, and I do want to sort of demonstrate the upper wing and what have you, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to. So let's pop the engine cowls on. This is the top cowl. There's a little bit of flash on the front of this, but it's sort of inside, so shouldn't be an issue. That sits on the top of that firewall quite positively. And you have a front section, a lower section, and the two side panels. Now this front section sports a little sort of lump at the bottom in the middle, which looks entirely like it's meant to be there, but it is not. That is the other sort of little moulding floor. You see it at the bottom there. It's more than flash. It's literally a chunk out of the edge of the moulds, but that needs to come off, so that the lower part of the cowl will fit into it nicely. But it does protrude, it's too thick, so that internal area there is going to have to be trimmed thinner so that it matches this dimension here, or trim off that locating lip completely and just rely on glue, either or. Now there are so few locating places on this because it is all just held in points. I don't think really that I can realistically tape all of this together. So this side panel, it forms a curve where the oil tank sits on the side and it juts out around it. Same on here. It will locate to the top cowl but doesn't really glue on anywhere else. It goes around the exhaust. Nice point, a nice feature that I noticed here with cutting these out. You could see that there's a hole there. That is where the cowl scoop locates, and the cowl scoop is included as a separate part, which is nice. I can't find it. There we go, here. It's a separate piece and obviously moulded hollowly. So nice thing about that, obviously it's quite nice anyway. You could then use a bit of a get around file and thin that down to scale, or indeed use the litho plate trick that I showed you in one of the tornado videos and use this as a former and make a new one out of metal so that it's already thin. So let's give up on that because I can't really tape it together suitable for viewing. So on the top wing then, going back to that, it's assembled, it's got the lower fuel tank detail. As it's supplied, the upper half from the kit just sits in the middle here. And as I said on the sort of inbox part, it does leave you with a seam along the front. It isn't a terrible seam, but it will need dealing with, and it will be tricky because the corrugations are quite fine even in this scale. But it is nice, it's a nice part otherwise. The resin one will require a little bit of this leading edge trimming away, and then it will sit into position, and there will be no awkward join to deal with. The join will be back here where there's already a moulded in rib on the underside, so that saves a lot of work. And the other thing is the side of this resin one has the corrugations moulded in. Well, on the instructions you may or may not have noticed that the drawings show this kit fuel tank having the corrugations in the sides. You can see it here. However, in real life, the kit tank does not in fact have the moulded in corrugations on the side. It's completely devoid of detail. So the resin fuel tank is a definite no-brainer for me. That is definitely a good upgrade to go ahead and get. Right then, so to fit the top wing then, it basically balances on the cabane struts, and the cabane struts are here. These are the N-shaped struts, sometimes called N struts as well. They fit quite positively to the fuselage itself. However, again, sellotaping them in place for the purposes of showing how this thing goes together is probably not going to work. They do, however, fit very, very nicely, and with a little bit of liquid cement should hold in place really, really well. But like the rest of the kit, the plastic's quite soft, so I think caution is going to be required at every stage with this, because it could bend out of shape quite easily, I think. So I'll try and tape it and see if it will play the game, but I think probably it won't. That's one. This is definitely a thing with biplanes, that you need 6 hands, or at least extra fingers on the 2 hands you do have a lot of the time. Obviously the use of glue assists with all of this. So that's a quite positive, nice little location in the front there. They're not big, deep, strong locations, but they are positive, and that's probably more important, frankly. Now the way that locates into the top wing, you can see there's a little rebate in the front of the fuel tank there. The front struts sit there, and the aft struts just sit in the back of this cutout here. And I'll just offer it up. This is the first time I've done this, so we'll find out together. Here we go. Yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to tape this, but that does sit on there quite happily, thank you. Now, the way I generally build biplanes, and I am not a biplane expert, I have built a few, and I've built some quite complex, naughty ones as well, but I'm not a biplane specialist by any means. The way I tend to do it, yeah, this is not going to work, is I will glue these into position at the bottom and they'll be fully set, and I'll line them up by eye as best as possible, and that can be incredibly difficult because sometimes, you know, they splay out or in or whatever. These are vertical, and so I would just glue them in and line them up as close to vertical as possible, and then I will glue the top wing on using just these middle struts like so. And most biplane kits will hold together quite happily done thus, and you know, obviously line it up as best you can whilst you're gluing it like so, using your eyes, or if you wish there are jigs available out there. And then once that's in and set, I add the interplane struts afterwards. The interplane struts are the ones that go between the wings, hence the name. I really can't do this with tape, I'm so sorry. I thought it was a bit adventurous, but I thought it might be fun. It's not as much fun as I hoped. Yeah, and then plug the interplane struts in one by one like that, like so, and all the time as you're doing this with your extra hands and fingers, just making sure everything continues to be lined up, and that's how I work it. It's very, very easy to make jigs or measuring tools out of pieces of plastic, and a really useful thing that you can use is this art board stuff. This is just a stand that I made that the Tornado model sits on. The Phantom model has one as well. It's just a sort of foam core with the sort of paper covering on it. It's quite cheap to buy. Places like eBay. It comes in all sorts of different sheet sizes, and you can just cut it with a knife and glue it together with a hot glue gun, and you can make all manner of jigs and things and measuring devices with it. Another very useful one actually is Lego. You can make a stand out of Lego bricks that the model kind of locks into, and use that as a base to keep the model square. You know, set it up on its datums so that you've got something to work to for the top wing if you need it. What else have I got? The undercarriage legs there. They fit into these holes here. This is a one-piece moulding. It's really quite impressive, and that literally just plugs into the holes in the bottom here. No dramas. With struts that go aft and struts that go forward. So yeah, there you go. There's how it fits together. Sorry I couldn't build it any more than this, but as I say, with tape, that's, yeah, it's not going to happen, is it? I didn't think it would, but I thought I'd give it a go. There is a bit more flash than I'm used to with these kits. This is something I'm seeing across the trade, to be honest. I don't know if it's the rising cost of production, probably something like that, making it a more attractive proposition to have a not quite perfect mould. Maybe the sort of the thing with the sort of the stubs and notches in joint faces isn't something I've come across with ICM kits before, to be honest with you. But the surface finish on all of the parts is gorgeous. It's smooth without being shiny, so it's really nice surface for paint. I think it could have done with slightly stronger plastic with a kit of this nature. I think this is going to build into a relatively fragile model. Size wise, as you can see, it's a nice size. It's not really big, but it's not really small. If I bring Foxy in, about the size of a 48th Tornado, so not a bad size at all. For 30 quid. Really good value. Love it. Lovely kit, and yeah, some experience of biplanes is probably going to be preferable with this one. The Fiat was really simple in comparison, and a little bit of care due to the nature of the sort of slightly unrobust plastic that they've used. And a sort of a final point, I guess, these extras I've bought cost in total £61, so I've gone and spent twice as much money as the kit cost on extra parts to put on the kit, most of which, in truth, well, certainly the resin parts provide minimal sort of extra appearance on the kit parts. The photo etch sets, on the other hand, I think do provide a genuine sensible upgrade, but don't buy both because there is repetition across the two. I think of the two, I probably prefer the Ames stainless set, and it's £5 cheaper as well, which is always nice. Where's Ames? That's the second question. Yeah, this is £18, whereas the Eduard one is 23. And if, like me, you're not really all that enamoured of the circle game, then there's not really any good reason to go for the Eduard one over the Ames one, in my opinion. So there you go. That is the ICM 1/32 scale Tiger Moth. £30ish at your local hobby stores. I say this one came from modelsforsale.com at £32. I'm really pleased with it. Looking forward to whenever I might get a chance to build it. Hope you got something out of this. Hope it was useful. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Until the next time we meet, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.